Thanks to some very mild temperatures in recent weeks, some folks are starting to see plants budding in their yard.
Can you believe that? In February, Fox 11's meteorologist Christian Palacio spoke with a horticulturalist to see how this weather is impacting our plants.
Really, my biggest concern is wondering what the plants are all thinking right now. I think they might be a little confused right now.
Confused may be just the right word. Viewers submitted photos via Chime In of tulips and daffodils sprouting in their yard. And it's not just happening on people's property, but also here at the Green Bay Botanical Garden.
And we've been noticing a lot of the same things at the garden the last couple days now that the snow is starting to melt. So, it's not very uncommon for these things to happen.
Lindsay Hendricks is the horticulture manager at the Botanical Garden. She says plants like tulips and daffodils are early spring bloomers and like to get a feel to see if the warmer weather will stick around.
Even though they're coming out right now, it's not really the right time. They're not really actively growing. If we do get a cold snap or more snow, they're actually going to be like, okay.
And you may find these early bloomers in specific sites of your property.
Where you might see a lot of action happening right now is if you have a house with a southern exposure, or the side of a building with like brick or stone that gets really warm during the day when the sun is actually out.
Those little microclimates can warm up a lot faster than other areas of shade or have snow on the ground still. But what does happen if it stays warm longer?
If they keep getting to a point where their flower buds are starting to push, crops like, say, cherry trees, apple trees, a lot of the fruit trees like up in Door County, if they start blooming before we get like a cold snap, that can actually kill those flower buds.
So what are some ways to prevent the death of such crops?
You can cover certain crops like conifers or trees or shrubs even, but what we use here at the garden is actually burlap to protect some of our trees. But otherwise, like old bed sheets or like blankets and stuff too, anything that will provide a little bit of insulation.
In Green Bay, meteorologist Christian Palacio, Fox 11 News.
All right, Lindsay, so at Fox 11, we've actually had a couple of viewers submit some photos about some budding that is sprouting in their yard. Could you explain, is that the case also here in the Botanical Garden?
Yes, Christian, well, good question. We've been noticing a lot of the same things at the garden the last couple days now that the snow is starting to melt. So, it's not very uncommon for these things to happen when you have like a lot of snow and then it melts and then it starts being a little bit above warmer temperatures, because a lot of those early spring blooming plants like daffodils and even tulips will start thinking that hey, it's spring, I need to start poking my head out of the ground. So they will start getting their noses and little leaves out of the ground to kind of check things out. But they can handle the cooler temperatures because they're a very early spring blooming plant. So even though they're coming out right now, it's not really the right time. They're not really actively growing. They're like starting to, but they're not like super crazy growing until it gets a lot warmer. So if we do get a cold snap or more snow, they're actually going to be like, okay. The part of the plant that is a little bit more sensitive to the cold are the flowers, but those usually come after a lot of the foliage is already up. So we don't really have to worry about that too much. But where you might see a lot of action happening right now is if you have a house with a southern exposure or the side of a building with like brick or stone that gets really warm during the day when the sun is actually out. Yeah. Those are kind of little microclimates that warm up a lot faster than other areas that might be in the shade or have like snow on the ground still. And so those areas of bulbs might start pushing a little bit sooner. And that's what we're kind of seeing here. Like if you look behind me, you can probably see the little tips of some of these daffodils poking up out of the ground here. You know, this is a very slight southern exposure, but it's enough where we kind of have some of those little guys starting to poke out of the ground. So that's kind of what to look for, but don't really have any fear because it's a normal part of the process. It happens here every year. It's just sometimes a little bit earlier than others depending on the season.
Gotcha. Yeah, and in the short term, we're still going to expect possibly to have well above average temperatures. We might even continue to have parts of our area to have record-breaking highs. So is that, can we, even though the buds are still not quite like ready to grow out yet, do they continue to kind of get a feel for it as it maintains the warmer temperatures?
Yes, they will keep growing as long as it stays warm. But the thing about that though is if they keep getting to a point where they're flower buds are starting to push, crops like, say, cherry trees, apple trees, a lot of the fruit trees like up in Door County, if they start blooming before we get like a cold snap or before our chance of frost is like over, which is usually the end of May, if their flower bud gets farther enough along and then we get a really cold snap, that can actually kill those flower buds. So they'll turn brown, they'll turn black, they'll fall off, and then you lose your fruit crop. We also have magnolia trees here at the garden, and a lot of people in Green Bay area, the state probably have them too, those really nice gorgeous flowers. Well, those flower buds are not hardy as well. So if they start coming out too early and then we get a cold snap before they bloom, then you're going to lose all your flowers on your tree. So it's kind of like depends on the crop and how much it can handle, but if it does stay warmer and we don't get cold snaps, those plants are going to get those signals to like stop growing. They're just going to keep growing because they think it's spring. So we're hoping it doesn't stay super warm for super long, that it does cool down. A lot of the plants that are starting to grow now, like the daffodils, can handle the cooler temps and even some more freezing snow, that sort of a thing. But that's why the snow's gone now, but we kind of want a little bit more, because if it does get cold again, that snow is going to insulate the plants and help prevent them from dying back completely if we do get like sub-zero temperatures. Because if there's no snow cover, there's nothing to insulate some of those plants, and that's sometimes where we get dieback of conifers and different perennials that aren't really as cold hardy, and they're just exposed to everything. So
Gotcha. Yeah, and if these warmer temperatures do kind of extend beyond what we're thinking in the short term, kind of like a medium range thing, is there any advice that you can give if there are crops that are starting to grow prematurely? Is there any way to maintain a heat source, or perhaps covering them with plastic bags?
yeah, so kind of depending on the crop, like we've had with conifers before too, where it starts getting warm out, their leaves and needles will actually start kind of like photosynthesizing again. And then once we get a cold snap, that kind of sets them back. So what you can do is you can cover certain crops like conifers or trees or shrubs even that are a little bit more sensitive if we don't have the snow cover. I would not suggest plastic though, because that's not breathable. So sometimes that can do more harm than good. But what we use here at the garden is actually burlap to protect some of our trees. It's more for deer, but a couple layers of that can kind of help protect the needles and leaves and sticks from fluctuating temperatures. But otherwise, like old bed sheets or like blankets and stuff too, anything that will provide a little bit of insulation, kind of trap that warmer air in with the plant and protect it from the cold air. But it also has to breathe, because if you don't get that breathing, then what's inside can get really warm and wet, and then that you can be inviting disease in to kind of take your plant down for another reason.
Of course, and that's not what we want.
No.